Area Zero, a terrifying location that lies at the heart of Paldea. Cut off from the rest of the world, it houses countless secrets and has enamored the people of Paldea for thousands of years. Over the course of recorded Paldea history, many would venture into the crater, but seemingly few had ever made it very far. Only 200 years ago, another intrepid group of explorers managed to venture deeper into the caverns than anyone before, laying eyes upon wonders never before seen. These findings would be recorded in the Scarlet or Violet book, written by one of the explorers, Heath. Deep in the cavernous depths of Area Zero, this team would discover a group of very unusual Pokémon, what we now know as Paradox Pokémon. But now, hang on a minute. Professor Sada and Turo were the ones to build a time machine, and that wasn't until centuries later, only around a decade before the modern day. Depending on your version, these Pokemon could be from the past or the future, so it's not simply a case of them somehow living inside the crater till the modern day. So what's going on here? When I made my first theory, I took everything the game said to me at face value, and I didn't really even notice the contradiction with Heath documenting them so long ago. To be honest, I did get quite a few things wrong in that video, and I failed to acknowledge some other possibilities as well, something I only realized thanks to all your comments. So after that, I was kind of scrambling to think of what to make a video about next, and I wasn't really sure what to do until I started noticing a trend in the comments. Many people in the comments have brought up this imaginary theory, and it sounded interesting to me. So as I delved deeper and deeper into it, I started to kind of flip to the side of this theory. Though this doesn't completely invalidate my previous video, anything's still possible as of now, and both theories do have their own holes, so I'm sure we'll find out the truth when we get the inevitable DLC. So what is this imaginary theory? Well, put plainly, this theory suggests that Paradox Pokémon aren't actually Pokémon from the past and future. Rather, they were created artificially somehow. But created by what? Well, one of the biggest mysteries in Scarlet and Violet is what many are calling the third legendary. Hidden within the deepest parts of Area Zero is the source of the very terrestrial Hidden within the deepest parts of Area Zero is the very source of the terrestrialization. Hidden within the deepest parts of Area Zero is the very source of hidden within the Hidden within the deepest parts of Area Zero is the very source of the terrestrialization phenomenon. In the first research station you come across, there's a logbook that describes some being whose name is expunged. It's described as having overlapping hexagonal plates that somehow caused the phenomenon. And in the final page of Heath's book, we see a drawing with a very similar description. But there's something odd about it. Many of the words are scrubbed out, something that Arvin confirms is present in every copy. But there's also another thing. Take a closer look at the drawing itself. There's a big disc with hexagonal plates, like the being is described as. But on closer inspection, there appears to be two of these. One big and one small, with what looks like a little crown at the top. On the surface of the big object, we can see water, mountains, clouds, a sailboat, and what looks to me like an octopus. But at the bottom, there's a void with what looks like stars. We can also spot other planets out in the background. So looking at the whole picture, it seems like this could be a planet? Maybe some kind of depiction of our world, with the disc ominously hovering over it? Or maybe something else. Another planet entirely? Either way, that seems pretty strange to me. And it also doesn't look like any other sketches we see in the Scarlet or Violet book. In fact, it almost looks medieval, if that makes sense. Could this depiction have been made from someone long ago? Kind of seems unlikely. Could Heath have been possessed to draw it? I don't know, but it definitely doesn't look like just a normal sketch. I mean, most of the image comes from the negative space. It kind of seems almost as if it were a black background and someone drew over it with white. In order to draw something that looks like that, it would take a lot of time and effort, not to mention precision. Precision the sketch artists on this journey just didn't have. Every other sketch we see has rough and jagged lines, like what you'd expect from researchers out in the field. Actually, that's straight up just not true. A couple other pieces in the book are also like this. They were probably drawn after the expedition, maybe made by artists Heath commissioned or something. I really don't know how I missed this while I was looking through the book for the video, but I guess that just goes to show you how strong confirmation bias can be sometimes. Although it is still kind of an odd depiction, but it could have just been drawn like that to make the journey seem more fantastical. I don't know, but on with the video. On this page, Heath also mentions finding the entity after being separated from the group, but it wasn't the first time he stumbled across something strange while separated. He also mentions being separated from the group on another page, and was found unconscious after having a dreamlike experience, where he spoke to an unknown person. Upon waking up, he found he was holding these sketches and writings, all in his own handwriting. While we can't make out what it says, there are quite a few hexagons drawn on it, as well as what appears to be a little crown. This vaguely matches up with what we know the entity to look like, but not entirely. Perhaps in these instances, this being was controlling Heath and having him draw these pictures. But why? I've racked my head over this for a long time, and I think I've finally come up with a satisfactory answer. What if this entity is the so-called time machine, pulling in Pokemon from who knows where and modifying them, making them look like how people imagine they would have looked in the past, or what they will look like in the future? That, or it could simply be creating them from scratch, although I think them all being based on pre-existing Pokemon is a key factor. If it was creating everything from scratch, you might expect them to all look more unique, like an Ultra Beast. Though, of course, it could simply be mimicking existing Pokemon too. Either way, this would also help explain why they have no evolutions. They don't have these other forms and can't breed because they've been genetically or magically modified into a different form. And just as an aside, some of you have pointed out before, just because we don't see those forms doesn't mean they don't exist in canon, which is fair. Maybe we will see the other evolutionary forms in the future for the Paradox Pokémon, but as of right now I'm personally operating under the assumption they just don't exist. Now, we still have a little hole in this theory. How did Heath see them on his expedition? If you look at them being from different points in the timeline, you can easily believe they got flung around and even the Violet Pokemon got thrown into the past. It's not exactly solid, but it makes sense. But with this theory, time travel isn't on the table, so how could they have ended up in the past? Well, maybe we're thinking about this the wrong way. What if this entity always had the ability to create these Pokemon? It would be able to make them on a small scale, thus allowing Heath's group to have rare sightings of them deep in the caves, but not much more than that. It was only after the professor began experimenting and inventing that they essentially played right into this entity's hands, modifying it with tech to facilitate their creation of more Paradox Pokémon. When it gave Heath that dream, it could have been trying to coerce him into making something. Perhaps the very thing that the professor of the modern day made. Looking back at the sketch, it does look as if it's detailing the specifics of the entity itself, almost as if it wanted them to learn about it and study it. And so this leads back to the question of why. What does this entity have to gain from creating Paradox Pokémon? Even from the perspective of it actually being a time machine, what would this entity have to gain from pulling in past and future Pokemon? That's something that's impossible to figure out. We could sit here and theorize all day, but whatever its intentions are simply incomprehensible to us. We mere humans couldn't ever hope to fathom why it would want this. But maybe we will find out in the DLC. After all, there are still 2 Paradox Pokemon left unaccounted for. On one page of his book, Heath notes and imagined Pokemon. The fascination with the unique-looking Pokemon dwelling within Area 0 tickled the artist's imagination, prompting him to make a sketch of what they thought what else could inhabit the depths below. Depending on your version, this Pokemon is either a combination of Johto's beasts, or a combination of Unova's Swords of Justice, sans Keldeo. But either way, they're strictly imaginary. This part is very speculative, and we have to step outside of Pokemon lore for a second. But if we get so much as a glimpse of these becoming real Pokemon in a teaser trailer or something, I think that all but confirms this particular theory. The Swords of Justice combo could still be a Paradox Pokemon of the future. I mean, look at Iron Valiant, for example. It's kind of a combination of two different Pokemon already. But Johto's Beasts were created only relatively recently by Ho-Oh. What are the odds the sketch artist just so happened to perfectly draw some extinct creature he'd never seen before? Now, I went out of my way to not look at any leaks or data mines, so if by chance there's anything to support this speculation, please at least put a clear spoiler warning in the comments if you bring it up at all. Not everyone likes looking at that kind of stuff, so I just ask you to all be respectful of people not wanting to be spoiled. So, let's put this full theory together. This entity comes into existence. Whether or not it was a thing that came to the planet and created the crater, or was born as a result of whatever hit the planet is uncertain. But there must be some kind of connection. For whatever reason, this being wishes to create life. Could it be related to Arceus in some way? A part of it that was cast out? Or a failed creation of Arceus? Maybe this Pokemon was once a creator deity on the same level as Arceus in another dimension. Regardless, it yearns for creation, but it struggles to birth even a single Pokemon. It starts pulling in Pokemon from elsewhere in the world, modifying them to birth its own form of life, but it still has a hard time doing this. It desperately attempts to draw explorers in, but unfortunately for everyone, Area Zero is simply too hostile, due to the very Paradox Pokemon lurking in the shadows it created. Despite this, a group does eventually manage to venture into the lower depths, and a man named Heath records everything he sees. This entity takes advantage of this, and manipulates him the best it can, sending him details of its anatomy through a dream. Heath himself does actually manage to see the entity in person, but for whatever reason, no further studies were conducted here. Could the experience have terrified the men so much that they requested no further teams go down there? Whatever the case, it wasn't until over a century later that further research began. And it wasn't until just 10 years prior to the modern day that the professor discovered the power of the Terra Crystals. Now, the crater is full of Paradox Pokémon, and an ecological tragedy was only just prevented thanks to you and the friends you made throughout your journey. But is it truly over? Well, that remains to be seen. And that's all I got for this theory. I want to give a special thanks to @TheSkabRabbit on Twitter, who has compiled a whole Google Doc of pages from various in-game books. This was a ton of help, and in addition to that, they've also compiled a bunch of other mysteries and clues as to what else might be going on within the Paldea region. The mysteries of Paldea run deep, my friends, so I urge you to check out their doc. Maybe you'll learn some things, and maybe you'll even be able to help the community solve some puzzles. I'd like to also thank Twitter user Lewtwo for compiling a Google Doc of literally thousands of assets across the entire Pokemon series. This is also a really big help, and I encourage you to go and check it out for yourself. Now you're free to click off, but I would like to say a few things first. I am absolutely blown away by the amount of support my first theory got. In fact, I was so blown away that it kind of started to get overwhelming, and I started to panic. Will I be able to continue making good content? Can I live up to the expectations I've set? Ultimately, all I can do is try and hope. But it obviously wasn't going to do me any good thinking about what if, so I got to work on the script. But it definitely took a lot of time. My previous theory video was something that just kind of came to me one night, and I decided to write it down. But after that, I was kind of stumped as to what else I should do. Luckily, I had all your comments to ponder over, and a handful of comments made mention of this theory, so I delved into that a bit. But I kept running into a bunch of roadblocks. This is actually the 5th time I wrote this all from scratch, but I finally feel like this turned out to be a satisfying video. I think. I hope. But, you know, I'm sure there are still a lot of holes and other things I missed, so just like last time, please let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. And I also hope you look forward to more content in general. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be a little bit more consistent than this going forward. I do want to do some other Pokemon theories, and some other Pokemon content in general. But I also want to branch out so that I'm not specifically locked to doing only Pokemon content, you know? So I'm thinking there will be a variety of stuff in the future. and I hope you stick around to enjoy it. Or you can just ignore it and wait till the next Pokemon Theory, whatever floats your boat. But regardless, I do hope you stick around. And now the video is over. Bye-bye.